Howard, come on up.
Yeah, sorry, I wasn't sure if I should. Maybe it's the Drew show. I don't know.
Yeah, so have you know we both had to pitch Anna Wintour at Condé Nast? We won't talk about the outcomes, but so this is kind of a great pleasure for me. You know, as Paul mentioned, I'm Drew Schutte. I've worked at Condé Nast for a long time, and I actually hired Howard a long time ago, and he's done a much better job than I did with the brand, and I'm really thrilled. But he's one of my favorite people, both personally and in business. So it's great to have this conversation with him, if you will, this fireside chat. I love that new expression.
Yeah.
We're like in here.
Feels so natural. Right.
But you know, Howard, I'll give you like the 2-second flattering. But in this, Howard's in his time at Wired has brought it to be magazine of the decade by Adweek, which he was there for much of that. Advertising Age's A-list, Adweek's Hot List. He's truly a digital leader. You know, in 2012. 50% of the revenue of the brand was from digital. That was very different for what I'll call kind of a legacy media company, and he made that happen. He's done a lot of really innovative brand extensions, the Wired Business Conference, the cafe at Comic-Con, some of you have been to, I'm sure, and the really highly successful launch of one of the first, and I would say the best, I believe, iPad edition of a magazine, and we can talk a little bit about that. And all of this has gotten him into the Advertising Hall of Achievement in 2012. Crane's 40 under 40. Are you still under 40?
No, September. Right. I'm 40
all
officially,
right.
Yeah.
So he had 40 under 40 for a while.
And I need a new headshot, I think. This is getting a little dated, frankly.
Yeah. We do look like the
Blue Steel.
Murderers.
Yeah.
Serial killers. And before that, before he came to Condé Nast, he was the publisher at Popular Science. And he did go to Ohio State. And so I just throw that out there because whenever I meet someone from Ohio State, they're pretty passionate. And I said, hey, they're doing 10-0 this year. Howard goes, they're 22-0. So just rubbing it in. So let's dig into this conversation. You know, you're running one of the preeminent, digital brands. Started as a print brand, interestingly enough, and only became digital in the early, 95. But you write about it, you live it, it's a digital brand. But we live in this world where digital has changed everything about our magazine business, how we distribute content, how consumers consume it, how we monetize it. And you've got all these different platforms you've got to deal with, and we kind of say we're not a magazine anymore. But if you're not a magazine, what are you?
Maybe depends who I'm talking to sometimes, but I think, for us, ultimately, we like to think of the magazine as being part of who we are. It is not the extent of who we are, So the basic strategy we take out to the market, and I think we do this editorially, we do this on the business side, is we like to think of the magazine as a device. And that device is a content distribution mechanism, and it's no different than a desktop, a laptop, a smartphone, an event, a social stream. And I think freeing ourselves of the confines of thinking about how content or brand side experiences need to manifest in a magazine-centric world first, but can start in any one of those individual experiences and then go across the ones that make sense. Sometimes it's all of those places, sometimes it's only one or two, has been really liberating for us. Somebody earlier, I forget who it was talking about that, and I think it might have been Dave Vineski, and I think for us, that's really the best indication of how far we've come, not as a magazine or a media company, but I think as a community, and our to-market strategy for that community is the same whether you're an advertiser or whether we're producing content.
So, what do you think about when, we live in this digital world and people feel like they can buy a demographic somewhere? And, if I say that to you, well, I can buy your demographic somewhere. What's your response to that in 2013?
Yeah, well, you can, right? I mean, let's be clear. There are ways to buy the demographic, but I don't think that whether if we were a magazine only or a media company or a community that we've ever sold ourselves as a demographic. The categories that buy purely on demographic basis are not the ones where we play, frankly. Pharmaceutical and packaged goods, that's not really a significant revenue contributor for us. So the experiences we tend to focus more on are those that are, you could call it premium, sometimes you call them native, now we used to just call them advertorials, but ultimately we try to create an experience that aligns you inside of an environment and a content experience within a community that is a bit more lean back, and I think generally, and knock wood, it's working still, commands a much higher CPM, and I think gets us out of the traditional conversation of the spray and pray.
Yeah, man, I think it's worth noting that in 2013, Wired will have its most profitable year ever, and print is significantly up and profitable. So I think that's testament to that.
Well, that strategy that I spoke about, what we've found is that the more that we push our digital initiatives, our event initiatives, our non-advertising, revenue streams, the more that print continues to find place and purpose, right? It's one of the frustrations I have, frankly, is when digital businesses will talk about a magazine is a legacy brand, and they use the word legacy as it's supposed to be like an insult, like a legacy brand. Well, actually, I think that's the greatest possible thing we could have, because in print there is a tangibility, there is a sense of place and purpose. Frank Rose earlier called it that candlelight moment that is a bit more meaningful. That gives our brand permission, opportunity, and most importantly, strength to manifest itself out into the digital realm. And that's been a great platform for us to stand on. It's now a smaller contributor in terms of the allocation of revenue we have than digital is, but it's no less important. It will always be important. It's just, I think that shift in mix will continue to happen because print will grow at 5% revenue a year. Hopefully it has been. I think it will continue to, and digital will continue hopefully to grow at 25% a year. That the scales of digital justice will shift, but print isn't going away.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about some of that transformation. There was a question over here about mobile before. Mobile's a challenge, right? And we say mobile, we've got tablet, we've got the smartphone. So let's break those up. And I see Wired, and I know Wired, you're optimized for the smartphone, but not on the tablet. Can you talk about how you approach tablet and smartphone and why you optimize for one and not the other?
Yeah, oftentimes people will ask if it has something to do with the success or experience we've had on our digital edition through Adobe. It's actually unrelated. The reality is that it's really quite easy to transfer our advertisers' assets from the desktop experience to, on the iPad, a Safari-based browsing experience. So they're reasonably interchangeable, and it seems to be easier to do that. And so we've had a lot of focus there. But our mobile efforts are, come along quite a bit. Like 35% or 38% of our overall digital traffic to Wired.com comes from mobile. Last year at this time, 5% of our revenue came from mobile. And if you're on my side of the desk, that's horrifying. That's an absolute disaster. And so we spent with your team, frankly, a lot of time this year, and we'll finish the year 18% of our revenue comes from mobile. That's still not where I want it to be, but it's a huge, healthy jump. And I think we're starting down the path now of writing that and getting it to a point where we're represented well in all the different places we play. We'll just have to go where consumers go. That's the reality.
And how are the advertisers towards your mobile offerings versus your tablet offerings versus your smartphone offerings?
I think they use them for different things. Some of the demos are different, frankly, and I think there still remains this bias to reach consumers that have tablets as if they're some special segment of the population. I personally don't understand it. My 68-year-old mom has 3 tablets. She's not who most of you are marketing to at this point, but there seems to be a bit of a bias there. So, and I think we can sometimes do different things because of the form factor. It's a larger screen, so you have more real estate with which to play.
What do you think about apps versus mobile web, and how do you approach that? When do you do one over the other?
I think they each have a place. It would also be dependent on what kind of brand I'm at. For me at Wired, I don't want 12 apps in and around the app stores. It doesn't make sense to me. Now, if I were at the New York Times, I might feel differently because a real estate app seems really organic, right? And maybe others do as well. But for us at Wired, I want one singular icon on a consumer's smartphone or on their tablet, and I want that to be a portal for all things wired. Again, we don't focus on the utility-based nature of the consumer app experience. We're not, no matter how much money anyone gives us, I doubt our edit team is going to allow me to put out a wired mortgage calculator. So it's probably not likely for us to have more than one for the foreseeable future.
And so, you mentioned the digital magazine before. So let's shift over to, the tablet and the digital magazine. And a lot of people will say to you, well, why are you doing a digital magazine? This is a brand new, form factor. You should be more innovative and break away from the form factor of magazines and print. Are they right, or how do you respond to that?
I don't think they're right. I don't think they're wrong either. I think that we're, let's be clear. The magazine is still, in my opinion, the best possible branding vehicle we have, right? There is, something so incredibly engaging about print that you can't replicate almost anywhere. The tablet allows us to do that. In fact, I think in some crazy way, Instagram is doing that right now. You can't link to Instagram. You can't drive traffic from Instagram unless you use like Insta Repost or another separate app. You can't even share what else you see on Instagram, but yet there is something really deeply engaging and visual and amazing about it. So I think on the tablet, what we're really ultimately doing is experimenting. We're 2.5 years in from the date that Apple let us start finally selling subscriptions. We have 120,000 digital subscribers per month. We have another 120,000 print subscribers at Authenticate. That's a pretty significant chunk of the rate base at Wired. So I think we're starting to see that evolution, and it just goes back to the reality that there's additive content. But to say, Wired isn't doing anything unique there, I think is false. There's a lot of unique, interesting, bespoke content there. I do think there are a lot of other brands I see throughout the magazine landscape that aren't doing anything interesting, but I also don't think everyone has to do something interesting. Maybe you're just serving up news and it's a text-based experience with a little video. That might be enough for you.
Yep. And what do you think about the phone? Do you think there's a place for digital editions, digital magazines in that format on a 3-inch screen?
I do. I mean, the New Yorker's having an enviable amount of success there. Vanity Fair launched as well and is beginning to show some really nice signs of opportunity. We haven't done it yet at Wired, mostly because we haven't figured out the form factor. There's something so heavily dependent about the Wired experience on design, right? And so for us, it's not just a text-based experience. We need to have something that feels like Wired. And I think any avenue we pursue, any distribution mechanism we begin to sort of, build into and understand, it's got to look and feel like Wired. You can't go to any of these and think, well, this could be Mashable, or this could be Vanity Fair, or this could be, The Economist. You have to know the second you get there that this is Wired, because it looks, it feels, it breathes of and like the brand. And so I think that's the thing we're really hyper-focused on mobile right now for the 3-inch screen, specifically on the DE, and then ultimately, for anything we pursue.
I think that's what we've been, really surprised about, is that people will read these long-form articles on their phone. The numbers of New Yorker articles, and we all know some of those can be really long, but people are reading them and finishing them on their phone. Like, that really surprised us. So let's talk about making money, monetization, everyone's favorite topic. How do you, when you look at the advertising this year, there's display, there's native, there's video. Can you talk a little bit about, your approach to that and what you're doing to maintain rates and how you're approaching each of those categories? And I'll ask you again if you leave one out.
Yeah. How we maintain rates, I don't know. That's like how we argue with most of the folks in this room in some respects. I mean, digital is an interesting beast because it has the heaviest downward pressure of any medium I think we've ever seen, and that's not changing, right? It's not going away. There's no, as we like to say, Wired, there's no middle class in digital, right? You're high, you're low, and that middle class is eroding, and most of it's going to go low or go away. So for us, how we, what we're looking to is we've had a tremendous amount of success in video. Condé Nast quite publicly launched C&E, Condé Nast Entertainment, and we have a number of really amazing shows right now that we've launched that are getting tremendous traffic. And I think if I'll go out on a limb, do this on camera, which is dicey, but I'll say that I think over the next 10 years, the launch of C&E may be the most significant thing that Condé Nast has done. When I look at the traffic and the viewership numbers for the shows that we have on C&E, it's mind-blowing. And when you relate that back to a mid-tier cable network, we're crushing them. We're delivering so many more ads and so many more amazing experiences there. Now the revenue's not quite there yet, to be clear, but it will be, and it's showing real significant signs of promise. So 20 years ago, I would have launched a cable network. Today, I would launch a video network, which is exactly what we've done. And I think it's a tremendous, tremendous opportunity that a lot of our brand side partners have taken advantage of.
Could you talk a little bit about that? Because you had video on the site before, but with the launch of C&E, you started to approach it in a whole different way. That's made the big difference.
Yeah, we had a library of 25,000 videos on Wired.com. But if I'm, really honest with myself, I don't think anyone was coming to Wired to watch video. You didn't log onto your smartphone or into the browser and say, wow, let's see what I can watch on Wired today. It was an Easter egg hunt. You sort of meandered through the content. If you found one lying there in the grass, you were like, oh, I'll watch that. So right now, we're very much in the process of training users, training our community to understand that Wired is a place you go to, not just to read or listen, but to watch. And as we do that and continue to get better at it, the digital environment gives us an amount of flexibility that no cable network ever could. If a show sucks, we kill it. 2 episodes in, 3 episodes in, we move on and we launch another in a matter of weeks. That's or less sometimes. That's an amazing opportunity you can't have in a traditional broadcast model. So I think we're learning how to leverage the opportunities at our disposal, and I think in 10 years we're going to look back and we're going to see the C&E not just necessarily be a collection of videos on Wired or Vogue or New Yorker or Vanity Fair. It's going to be a cable network that has the potential in scale and scope to rival the existing model now.
What's the most popular video series that you're doing?
There's one called Codefellas that I love. Digiday just sort of nominated it for some award this morning. It's a web series with John Hodgman. Everybody knows John Hodgman. You just might not know who he is. He's the Microsoft guy in the Justin Long Apple ads, but he's a really amazing, talented writer and comedian, and he's written and he stars in this show that we have. It's a cartoon about the NSA, and it's a satirical sort of take on the NSA and what happens inside of that, and I won't spoil it, but it's about this much older agent in his 60s who gets paired with a 24-year-old kid out of college, and he makes fun of her for 3 episodes until the end of the 3rd when he realizes, holy shit, he's not her boss, she's actually his boss, and the show sort of takes suit from there.
My favorite is Angry Nerd.
Yeah,
I think he's kind of the Andy Rooney of the
geek
tech set.
Yeah.
So we have a couple minutes left, so I want to open it up for questions so we can get a couple of those in. Does anybody have a question for Howard? Back here?
So besides thinking about design and things that stand out from the Wired perspective, how do you think about competing with the tech internationally?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think ultimately for us right now, particularly in the digital space, and this is true for everyone, news is a full-on commodity. I'm not in the news business. I do not want to be in the business of having to report breaking news. Now we do it, right? And we'll continue to get our scoops, and that's great. But we have something internally we call the McCluskey curve, because he's one of our editors, and it literally starts here with breaking news. It's traffic, and then once it breaks, it dips down almost to nothing, 5,000 page views an article, and then back up again. And what's back up here is context, right? So I don't want to compete with a news cycle, and I think much of what those brands are doing, for better or for worse, is that. I want to be the place where occasionally we'll get news because of the strength of our relationships, the quality of our reporting, but ultimately I want Wired to be the place where you go to for context. And I think if you're if you're stuck competing with the pace of news, you're stuck competing with the pace of Twitter, and that's a technology problem. I'm not, I might write about technology, I might love technology, I do not want to be in the technology business. And, I find that for us, it's like, you've heard of the 3 Fs. Well, in digital, I think there's like, when it comes to like, if it floats, if it flies, or if it measures frequency, it's better to rent than own. And I very much want to continue down that path.
Do we have time for one more question?
Yeah, I want 2 things. One real quick, I really enjoyed the last issue where Bill Gates was guest editor, and I was curious I thought that was brilliant and really saw his mark throughout, and wondered if we're going to see more of that kind of innovation around that. And the second one is, as you talk about video properties, it's been classic that digital teams for publishers and things like that have usually been those kids that we hire that are sleeping in their mom's place and not getting paid, really. Are you seeing a shift, like, in the kind of media teams that you bring on board to produce content? Is it start becoming more of a mainstream producers as opposed to those 20-somethings that could run a camera? If that makes sense.
No, it makes perfect sense. Thanks for the compliment on the Gates issue. I think you will see a lot of that, a lot more of that. I think what Scott Dadich, our editor-in-chief, is doing right now, he has full-on raised the bar of what Wired is doing in the print space, to say nothing of the digital space. And there's a story that just went live now called The Surge about Bill Gates's attempts to eradicate polio. And you'll see an article design and template sponsored by Kia, again, that went live just about an hour ago. That's a fully responsive design that begins to start to give you a sense of where we're going with our design template throughout 2014. And as for the kids versus the pros, we're going to use a mix of both. Every show we do doesn't deserve to have a massive shoot with, crazy amounts of staff and a food service truck, right? Some do, and those that justify it will. And some will have hopefully some crazy kid that's going to invent the future. At Wired, we have a really interesting mix and range of folks, but at 40, I'm very much on the higher end of that, and I think that's a good thing. We have a really dynamic team, and when and where we need to work with radical media and some folks that really truly know broadcast, we will. And when and where we want some crazy kid to just hop and coach halfway across the world with a video camera, we will. And sometimes we get our most compelling stuff that way.
Excellent. Well, thanks so much, Howard.
Cool.
Keep up the great work.
Thanks, Drew. Thanks so much.